Welcome, and thank you for viewing our 2024-2025 financial aid presentation, where we will cover what you need to know to prepare to complete the free application for federal student aid. For the remainder of this presentation, we will simply refer to this as the FAFSA. Each year that you plan to attend a higher education institution, you will need to complete the FAFSA form. The information you provide in this form will be used to determine your federal aid eligibility. States will often use FAFSA information to determine your eligibility for state grants. The institutions you select to share this information with may use your FAFSA to determine scholarship eligibility. Federal aid consists of federal grants, which would be the Pell Grant. The maximum currently is $7,395 a year if you're considered a full-time student and full Pell eligible. Federal work study is federal dollars paid in exchange for part-time employment. The great part about this is the focus that school comes first. Unlike an outside employer who you may have to constantly remind about your class schedule, you don't have to worry about that with work study. Federal student loans consist of two main types of loans. Subsidized loans, which are need-based and interest is paid while you are enrolled at least half-time and during grace periods. The second type of loan is an unsubsidized loan, where no financial need is required. However, the student is responsible for the interest the entire period of the loan. Current interest rates are 3.73%, with origination fees of 1.057%. All federal student loans have a 6-month grace period after you graduate or drop below 6 hours a semester before payments begin. To be eligible for federal student aid, the student must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. They must have a valid Social Security number or alien ID. They must be enrolled or accepted as a student in an eligible degree or certificate program. If you question whether your program of study is eligible for federal aid, please contact your financial aid office. The student must be enrolled at least half-time for direct loan program funds. Students must maintain satisfactory academic progress. You must demonstrate financial need for need-based federal student aid. You must provide consent and approval for the exchange of your federal tax information into the FAFSA. Students must also have a valid high school diploma or GED equivalent prior to federal aid being dispersed. And finally, you must sign the certification statement within the FAFSA form. Students usually question whether they are required to provide parent information, especially those that may live out on their own. The following questions will help to determine whether you are required to provide parent information, or in other words, as we call it, if you are considered a dependent student or an independent student. The questions are: was the student born before January 1st, 2001? Is the student married and not separated? Will the student begin working towards a master's or doctorate degree during the 24-25 academic year? Was the student ever determined by a court to be in a legal guardianship or an emancipated minor? Does the student have children or other dependents that live with them and that they provide more than half of their support? At any time after the age of 13, was the student in foster care, a ward of the court, or both parents deceased? Is the student an unaccompanied youth that is homeless? Or is the student self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? If the student cannot answer yes to any of these questions, they must provide parent information. What if the student faces a situation where they are unable to contact their parent or where that contact poses a risk to the student? These are what we call unusual circumstances and would create a provisional independent student status. If this is the case, please reach out to the financial aid office at your institution as soon as possible to see what documentation may be needed. Unfortunately, the following situations, solely or in combination, do not create an independent student. When a parent refuses to help pay for education expenses. When a parent refuses to provide information for the FAFSA form. Parents no longer claim the student as a dependent on their taxes. Or the student does not live with the parents and is self-sufficient. Contributor is a new term for the 24-25 FAFSA form. This simply refers to anyone asked to provide information on a student's FAFSA form. Contributors would be any or all of the following: yourself, if you are the student, your biological or adoptive parents, your spouse, if you are married, or your parent's spouse, if they are married to someone other than your other biological parent. The following people would never be considered a contributor, as they would never be asked to provide information on your FAFSA form. Non-adoptive grandparents or guardians, foster parents, your fiancé, or even your other biological parent if they are not married and do not live with the parent contributing information to your FAFSA form. If you determined that you are a dependent student on the earlier screen, at least one parent will be a contributor. If your biological or adoptive parents are married and did not file taxes jointly in 2022, both parents will be asked to be contributors. If your biological or adoptive parents are not married and do not live together, the contributor would be determined by which parent provides the most financial support. If your biological or adoptive parents are not married and live together, both parents will be asked to be contributors. If your biological or adoptive parents are married and filed taxes jointly in 2022, select one parent to be the contributor. However, the parent completing the contributor portion of the FAFSA will be asked for the name, Social Security number, and date of birth for the other parent. If you are an independent student and are currently married and filed taxes jointly in 2022, you will simply be asked to provide your spouse's name, Social Security number, and date of birth in the FAFSA form. If you did not file taxes jointly with your spouse in 2022, you will need to identify them as a contributor, and they will be asked to provide their information to your FAFSA form. So now that we know who will be contributors to our FAFSA, how do we invite them to complete their section? You will need to know and provide the contributor's first and last name, their Social Security number, date of birth, and a valid email address. If the contributor does not have a Social Security number, you will be able to mark that as an option, and you will then be asked to provide their address. Be aware, if a contributor does not respond to their email request within 45 days, the student will have to resend the contributor invitation. You may be wondering, if I'm a contributor, what all information do I have to provide? You will first be asked to provide consent. This does not make the contributor financially responsible. Your consent allows for the IRS to exchange information to the FAFSA form. Without consent, the FAFSA form will not be complete, and the student will not be eligible for Pell Grants, work study, or subsidized loans. Since you will be using 2022 tax information to complete the 2024-25 FAFSA, your financial situation may have changed significantly since then. You do have options. Please contact your financial aid office to let them know that you may have a special circumstance. Special circumstances allow a financial aid administrator the ability to adjust data elements on your FAFSA form to more accurately assess your need for financial aid and make a truer representation of your current financial situation. So what happens when the FAFSA has been fully completed by the student and all contributors? Once FAFSA processes your form within 3 to 5 days, it will then be sent to the institutions selected on your FAFSA. We encourage you to be patient. Most schools are receiving several FAFSAs at a time and trying to process them as quickly as possible. Institutions will review your FAFSA when they receive it and be in touch with you. Schools will either send you an aid offer or request more information. If you feel like it has been several weeks since completing your FAFSA and you have not received a response, please contact the financial aid office at the institution. Thank you for joining us in reviewing the 2024-2025 FAFSA. Feel free to contact the SCCC Financial Aid Office if you have any questions or need help completing your FAFSA. You may contact us by phone at 620-417-1110 or by emailing financialaid@sccc.edu. Go Saints!